Late last night, after learning from Rabbi Michael Marmur here, a number of us, Rabbi Helfman, Cantor Maissner, a number of congregants, and I went to the Bloor JCC, and it was a great scene. It would give you great faith in the Jewish people and the Jewish future to see Jews of all ages there from across all denominational lines and from all geographical lines. Jews of all stripes, Reform, Reconstructionists, Modern Orthodox, Secular, Conservative, some Israelis as well, all joined for a Tikkun Leil Shavuot, an all-night study marathon. And some of us are paying the price. Holy Blossom has recently joined in a consortium of synagogues and Jewish organizations in the southern part of the city, where Jewish life is thriving once again. I imagine that with the subway line coming to Eglinton, we should consider what it might mean for Holy Blossom to become more urban. How can we anticipate and leverage the opportunities that are coming our way? How might we open up to these possibilities? Even physically, how might we open up to the city beyond our walls? For example, consider this beautiful facade that faces Bathurst Street. It is grand and it is beautiful. And those heavy oak doors, which are hand-carved with the symbols of justice and law, Sinai and Torah, those impressive doors are almost always locked shut. And the lions of Judah, mounted above them, stand guard. Imposing concrete, austere stained glass, beautiful and inspiring to be sure, but too often dark and closed. Imagine if we had an additional entranceway made of translucent glass on Ava Road, open and bright. What additional things might the passers-by presume about our congregation then? How might we welcome them in? How will we influence and impact our city? And how might we, in turn, be influenced by it? These are among the many things that we are considering now as we prepare to build together. The lineup last night was eclectic. Rabbis and professors from across the city offered classes on a range of topics, and Jewish artists were also among the teachers. I was pleased to see Martin Davidson, one of our lead architects from Diamond Schmidt. He was among the panelists discussing synagogue architecture last night. Working on our renewal project for many years now, Martin has become an expert in translating Jewish values and Holy Blossom's specific identity into mortar and brick, glass and steel. These are his building blocks for making Judaism deliverable, relevant, and enticing for the generations to come. My tools are less glamorous, but even stronger still, I believe, words of Torah. So we are taught that when the tablets of stone were smashed, the words, the letters, lifted right off of the surface of the stones and took on a life of their own, beyond the limitations of structure and things. Last night I taught the first commandment. Neither first nor commandment. Or is it? Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I Adonai am your God. It doesn't sound like a mitzvah. More a declaration, a statement of faith, an assertion of identity. And yet Maimonides teaches that it is one of the 613 commandments, that it is the commandment, the first mitzvah, the pillar mitzvah on which all other mitzvot rest. This is the mitzvah to believe. In his book Sefer HaMitzvot, Maimonides speaks of emunat ha'elohut, faith in godliness, faith in divinity, the foundational belief that God is first and foremost across the reaches of time and space. But later, Maimonides shifts his language from believing to knowing, from emunah to chokhmah and da'at. That shift in his language from faith to insight, is explained when he describes this first mitzvah as the pillar on which all religion and all science rest. Maimonides asserts that one can discover faith through the intellect. If we think on it hard enough and carefully enough, belief can be acquired. There's a story about the Maggid of Mezrich. A young seeker left his family to go and study with the Maggid. He stayed a long time until he found what he was looking for. And when he returned home, his father-in-law was furious and unleashed his anger, demanding to know how could he have possibly abandoned his family. What could justify that? What could he possibly have learned to justify that? I learned that there is a God, he answered. The father-in-law didn't know if he should laugh or berate his foolish son-in-law. He summoned the maidservant of the house, and he asked her, "Tell me, miss, is there a God?" She laughed nervously and answered simply, "Of course, sir. Everyone believes in God." "You see," said the father-in-law, "you abandoned your family for Mezrich to learn something that even an illiterate maidservant could have told you?" The man remained calm and explained, "She believes there is a God, but in Mezrich I learned to know there is a God." This Hasidic tale teaches the same lesson as Maimonides. Same teaching, different form. 200 years after Maimonides came another giant of Jewish thought, Crescus, and he rejects Maimonides' assertion that faith can be learned. Crescus says, you either do or you don't. You either have it or you don't. Faith cannot be cultivated or pursued like other disciplines. Faith is either part of your makeup or it isn't. It seems the historical backdrop to this teaching is significant. Crescus wrote from 14th century Spain, when Jews were making all kinds of choices about faith, to change one's faith, to hide one's faith, to live or die by one's faith. Crescus himself was imprisoned for false accusations, and his own son was among the many Jewish martyrs of the time. So when Crescus insists that faith is not a matter of choice, it's personal. He teaches that the first commandment is not a commandment at all. Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am Adonai your God, is not a mitzvah. Why? Because a mitzvah requires free will. One chooses to take on a mitzvah or to ignore it, to reject it, to bend it. One chooses how to respond to God's commanding voice. But in faith, there is no free will. There is no choosing. His criticism was likely intended to recast those Jews who surrendered their faith as never having had it in the first place. For if they had, they would not, could not, have given it away. Is the first commandment a commandment at all? Maimonides says yes, Crescus says no. Can one choose to believe? Maimonides says yes, Crescus says no. Can one acquire faith? Maimonides says yes, Crescus says no. I'd like to believe that we can be taught to believe. I'd like to think that through the pursuit of sacred study, through the discipline of soulful prayer, through an accumulation of life experiences, faith can be found. I'd like to believe that by saying the Shema with my children each night, I am cultivating an awareness of God in them. But I could be wrong. I feel certain that my own faith has been sparked and honed by models of faith that I've known in my lifetime and those I've only known through books. But I could be wrong. Crescus could be right. One student said last night, it could be like the color of our eyes, encoded on our DNA. No choice about it. I suppose it's possible that faith is assigned to some and not to others. But I believe that on a day like this, when we come together on a holy day such as this, when we come to a holy place such as this, when we hear the holy words of Torah, and we see before us models of leadership and scholarship and resilience, whether we fill our arms with a new baby or fill our hands with our grief, we are taking up that Siddur and offering words of Hallel, praises to God as best we can. I believe we are, each one of us, cultivating a kind of faith unique to each one. And another example of this is Kaddish, an affirmation of faith. And yet many self-described atheists recite Kaddish faithfully. Something takes over. Something resembling faith, if not faith itself, overwhelms the non-believer when it comes time for Kaddish. And there is no shame in that. It is not hypocrisy. It is striving. It is yearning. It is very real and very powerful and should be noted, cultivated. It is not a momentary lapse in faithlessness. It is the beginning of faith, a hint of the faith that could flourish. It should not be brushed off, but held and considered carefully. Kreskes may have recited Kaddish for his son, and he may have said, despite the high price for keeping faith with you, God, I keep faith with you, because I have no choice in the matter. Many of us here today in this sanctuary and in sanctuaries across the planet may say instead, despite the pain of my loss, O God, I will stand tall here and praise your name, because I do have a choice, a God-given choice. Reciting Kaddish can be an instrument, a vehicle for cultivating faith. I've seen it many times among our congregation. Perhaps you have felt it churning in yourself. Reciting Kaddish is an eloquent response to the call of that first commandment, Anochi Adonai Elohecha, I am Adonai your God, says the Eternal One. We are summoned back to the foot of the mountain, and there we stand tall, and we say with all the faith we can muster, Yitgadal v'yitkadash, magnified and sanctified is your great name, O God.